Okay, great. Welcome, Christy, to Girl Take the Lead. We're so excited to have you with us. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, we're going to have this great talk today about ego and all kinds of cool things. Do you want to tell tell our listeners a little bit about your background?
Sure. I have been running my leadership academy through Mindful Choice for the last 13 years. It is focused on ego management and really helps people just step into their authentic, mindset. The ego, how I use it, is not the aggressor or the mean, arrogant person in the room. It's really about the unconscious brain that we all have, the mindsets, beliefs, behaviors that hold us all back and sabotage our good intentions and our own leadership. So whether we're talking about speaking up at a boardroom, because your ego's questioning, if I say that, they're not going to like me, or whether it's deciding what kind of dinner you want and you've gotten in the habit of just saying I'm fine, or maybe you're the micromanager. So really identifying what ego types are showing up and how are they serving your leadership or your business role within your organization and in your personal life and relationships as well. Right. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I do. The reason we got into it was my own journey. About age 30, I was on my own career path. As an ambitious, independent woman, I was able to build this amazing life. On paper, it looked brilliant. And then one day, things happen and I had an accident that led me to not being able to take care of myself. And so the independent girl had to survive with others. And that was a really harsh reality that really shined the light on where my ego was showing me that I was happy and I was doing all these great things. I had all these amazing people in my life, but it was really making me emotionally unavailable to actually show up and build these meaningful connections that truly was supporting a great career path, but it wasn't supporting a fulfilled life.
Yeah. So you mentioned a little bit about the way we think about egotistical or kind of conceited, maybe. What do you find most of your clients have in terms of when they think about ego? Like,
So I look at ego as it's all of our strengths and weaknesses. I think our ego is our biggest strength. It's how we got to where we're at. If you are a successful individual, you're successful because of your ego. It's the thing that took care of us when we were kids. And it keeps you from being hurt, or helps you achieve amazing things. It helps you build really strong relationships. Unfortunately, as we get older, that same ego, when we overuse it, when we're starting to have to think more in the we mindset, it starts to hold us back. It sabotages relationships. It protects us and keeps the good people out too. And so what I always like to help people identify is, just again, those everyday behaviors that we all do. Unfortunately, they are unconscious. And so, the controller is it's the driver. It's motivated by being the best, getting to the finish line. And so when we aren't aware that controller is driving us, it can have the over perfectionist. And so we're never good enough. We're always chasing a dream, becomes a ghost eventually. And so we're always disappointed by people. No one's ever going to meet our expectations because they're most likely unrealistic. And we'll never meet our expectations. So we're always working longer hours, longer days, to prove ourselves. And being able to learn how to give yourself a break. Where is good enough? And learning how to manage that ego back so you make sure you're not at the finish line by yourself all the time. When you're the protector is where our values are, where our strong will, our ability to speak up, our directness, being able to have that genuine confidence in who we are and what we want. Unfortunately, with that mindset comes a very black and white energy. And so we can be incredibly stubborn. We can be emotionally unavailable. It makes us cool, calm, and collected in really stressful situations, but it can also make us very aloof or unrelatable. And, people don't quite get to know who we are. And we have so many different hats of like, this group gets to know me this way, this group gets to know me this way. And there's this image that, we kind of hold up to keep our hearts safe. We love the deepest in the protector. It's where our integrity lives. It's where our truth lives. And so somewhere along the line, most likely got hurt. And so this teaches you how to find gray. Where do you get to have your boundaries? Keep your walls up where they're safe and drop them where they're not. In leadership, building a relationship, parenting, you have to learn to drop those walls in order to have meaningful connections and purposeful interactions.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, when you do you do we have elements of all of these, or do you kind of relate more to one versus another?
Absolutely. There's three of the egos. And so ideally we use all three, about 33%, so when we use the complier, which is the one that's motivated by being liked. And so this is compassion, caring about people, deep connections, team building, getting people on the same page, caring about the people first, task second. Unfortunately, with that one, they struggle to delegate, make hard decisions. They avoid conflict. They struggle to give feedback. And so that is obviously one that we overuse as well. And really the thing that balances each of them out are the opposites, right? As a complier, we need to be more controlling. We need to set direct expectations. We need to speak truth. We need to trust that our decisions are good and that we can speak up and share our wisdom. We can trust that others can handle our emotions or handle our truth instead of sugarcoating or making everybody think it's fine. The controller needs complier. It's got to have more compassion. It's got to have more of that people ability instead of putting the task first. And so absolutely, we are all designed to have all three. Some are trained out of us more than others. Most of us have 1 to 2 dominant ones, and we have to pull a third one in to balance them all out.
So when you work with your clients, then are you asking questions to find about these three elements, or how do you identify them?
Yeah, so I use an assessment tool, one to just fast forward our relationship, and it becomes a black and white thing. So if anybody with that protector, a little bit of skepticism says, nope, that's not me. It's all in black and white. There's a picture and a visual that says, yeah, this is probably where you're at. And it's really hard to deny it. That's what I love about this tool the most. So I use the 360 assessment. It's not just your own perception of how you think you're showing up, but it's also the perception of everyone else and how they see you showing up. So it really shows you the self-awareness gaps that might be showing up in people's worlds. So every one of my clients actually goes through this assessment tool. And with that, then we're able to build in programs to customize how they show up and what they're going to work on. It clearly identifies which dominant egos they have, and then areas that they can quickly grow and adjust in order to manage that ego back.
Boy, that sounds just so interesting. How did you come to this? Like, I know you said that you had your accident, but had you always been interested in psychology and in this area specifically, or how did you find it? How did you find your passion, I guess?
I would love to say, yes, this was a driver since I was a kid and I'm just, geniusly fell upon it. Unfortunately, I think it was just the world had put me in some different situations that eventually put this in my lap. I started out as a kindergarten teacher, decided I couldn't be locked into a classroom. Then I started teaching orthopedic surgeons and cardiovascular surgeons and neurosurgeons in the OR. And it kind of became the joke of, well, surgeons aren't as much different than 5-year-olds when we all communicate through the same lens, just with different words and higher IQ, right? And so once I got into my own situation, started learning about coaching, learning about these human components, and then after my own fall, one of the things, actually, to back up really quick, one of the things I was most terrified when I was in wound care, it was one of my last sales roles. I was in the hospital educating and training staff. And when I would have a gap in my schedule, I would visit some of the patients that were in there who were by themselves, because I never really understood why people were in the hospital by themselves. It really broke my heart. And I would just ask them, where's your family? Why are you here alone? What's going on with you? And the most consistent story I heard was, I worked so much. I didn't really, I wasn't there when they needed me the most. I was providing for them financially. I loved them, but unfortunately I didn't show up for them. And I think we all know that story, whether it's our parents, whether it was us, whether we know someone that's been divorced, like that is a common story. Unfortunately, at the time, it was mostly 60-year-old men that I was talking to. And I was 28-year-old girl, right? Living this dream. But I started to realize after my fall, when I was turning 30, I wasn't dating. I was traveling the world. I had all these friends. I was, living in this penthouse apartment. I was doing everything you're supposed to be doing in the career world. And unfortunately, what was happening, it was my ego was driving my plan. I am a controller protector. So I have to get to the finish line. I had to win. I had to be the best. And I was doing all the amazing things you're supposed to do to get the trophy. But if we don't consciously build in the things to get the trophy on the family side, then we end up sacrificing. You're either happy at home and you're miserable at work, or you're miserable at home and you're happy at work, right? And I just learned in those moments when I was during my fall and I was in the hospital, and a couple weeks after, I had a call with my coach and I just lost it. I didn't realize how unemotionally or emotionally unavailable I was actually in my relationships. And when I had that awakening moment and I started to realize, what is this voice in my head? What is this thing that was driving me? I truly believed I was happy. I truly believed I had purpose. And then when it stopped and I had a couple of weeks of downtime, it was like, whoa, I really don't let people take care of me. I really don't ask for help. I really don't have relationships that knew about me. I had my own hats on and my own identities that this group got to know and this group got to know. And I was the fun Christie, and I was the friend you called when you were having a bad day. And I, made people feel better. But I didn't really have anybody that did that for me. I sat on my couch and ate, my pint of ice cream and watched a chick flick once a month. And that was how I emotionally sustained my groundedness. And so it just really hit me in that moment that, wow, I'm going to be that 60-year-old person that doesn't have the family, doesn't have the life. I may have all the success. And so it got me really curious about the egos. I was able to then start training. I learned about the leadership circle, which is a tool that helps identify some of these reactive behaviors. And once I was able to learn that, that's when I really truly started to build out the programs. I was already building programs around this ego. This gave me the tangible to now sell it to where people can see it and it was validated and it wasn't just, a conversation piece.
Great. Well, it sounds like if you were a newcomer to this whole thing and they weren't in they weren't your client yet, mm-hmm. How do people see their ego on a day in and day out basis? Is it through our feelings in our body, or what would you say to them?
It's in our behaviors, viscerally we feel it, but if you're not aware of it, they are unconscious behaviors, feelings, actions. So the ego is triggered by emotion. It's triggered by stress, pressure, change, things we all go through every day. Mm-hmm. And when we are conscious enough and we're self-aware enough, we can then identify it and then take ownership of it. We all know we have it. I mean, if you go through your life and you kind of look at, what are the patterns of life? What are the mm-hmm. arguments that I consistently run into? What are the things that consistently happen to me? I guarantee there's ego tactics that are going on unconsciously that you're not aware of. Simple things on a daily basis, behaviors, gossiping or judging somebody. That's an ego tactic. Your best self isn't a gossiper. We are usually gossiping or judging someone in order, one, to elevate ourselves, or two, because we're jealous, right? And so recognizing that that's an ego tactic. If you do that in the office, if you do it with friends, your family, we all do it. It's normal. I think that's part of normalizing the ego. Instead of judging it, most of us want to judge our weaknesses or other people's weaknesses. When we look at it just through the ego lens, these are just normal human behaviors. We all do them. And unfortunately, most of us deny these behaviors and avoid the reality of it. So we never take full ownership of it, which then sabotage our interactions. So you've got the gossiping, you've got, the I'm not good enough lens. So you're either comparing yourself to others and always, knocking yourself down, or you are the opposite, where you're always boosting yourself up and knocking someone else down, again, for you to feel better. Being able to recognize when you are emotionally responding to something that's probably a little more extreme than it needs to be, whether it's a short fuse that, someone said something and you now just took it personal and you had a short fuse and you snapped, whether you're attached to being right and now you're just stubborn and, having this argument for the sake of the argument, to prove yourself that you have worth and value. Those are all ego tactics. Micromanaging, over controlling a situation to feel in control, to make sure you don't fail. Those are ego tactics. Sabotaging relationships, on the personal side or at work. when you intentionally are looking for something to be wrong, in order to protect yourself to get any closer. And so you sabotage the relationship or the conversation. Avoiding conversations, difficult conversations, it's uncomfortable. I don't think they're going to be able to handle it. So we avoid having, any chance of conflict. That's another ego tactic. Using terms like "I'm fine," which we all do. No, I'm fine. BS, you're not fine. So again, holding back our truth and not speaking up when something's really bothering us, or we have wisdom to offer.
Yeah. So what are some things that people can do to manage that? Like, what do you suggest?
I think first and foremost, you have to be self-aware. You have to want to see it. So one is a deep dive of self-awareness. You have to recognize what your unconscious behaviors are without judgment. Two, you then have to take ownership of it. It's one thing owning, like being aware of it. A lot of times we're aware of our ego. So it's like, yeah, I know. I was emotional today, or yeah, I know I was micromanaging, or I was a jerk. And we use that terminology, but it's usually in a sarcastic way or a defensive way. That's not ownership. That's just saying, yeah, I know I do that. Being able to take full awareness and then full ownership. Wow, I'm fully aware that I can be too direct and that can hurt people's feelings. I'm really sorry. That wasn't my intention. Now we've just identified the ego, own the ego, and we can now manage it. Your ego is going to show up no matter what. You can't get rid of it. It's part of you. It's your good, bad, and ugly. And so it's really just giving yourself permission to own the ugly side of your greatness. Like at the end of the day, you're not great without having an ugly side, because we all overuse our strengths sometimes.
Yeah. And I think maybe learning from those situations, like what was going on in the moment that you could, I don't know. I often talk to myself, and just say, it's okay. You're safe. You don't need to go into protection or go into flight right now. You can just, it's okay. You're a big girl. You can do this.
Yeah, that's the belief system. Absolutely.
Yeah, getting at some of that.
I think the biggest thing is knowing the trigger points of it, right? So even before you get to that point, you have to know why. Why are you doing that, right? What is the old belief system? What is the old internal reaction? Why are you doing what you do? Because you can't change something unless you know why.
Yeah. Well, I think writing for me, I journal like crazy, to just try and get out what those beliefs are underneath. And I'm sure a lot of your clients probably do that too. One of the things that we've been working a lot with in the podcast has been bullies. And how do we work with difficult people?
I love this question because I think a lot of times the bullies are most likely the protectors. They come across a little more tense. They come across a little more direct. They're more black and white, so they can be very confrontational. I think, unfortunately, what happens is there's two sides to that. Yes, is that behavior wrong? 100%. And if you are a complier or you're falling into complier because of this bully, your ego is showing up too. And just because it's quiet and passive doesn't make you right. And so I think it's giving people permission and empowering them to take their voice back too, setting boundaries, speaking up. Most people aren't a jerk consciously, right? Most people aren't being a bully consciously. Now, yes, there is a very, very small population. Let's say 1% of the population is intentionally crazy and, has some sociopathic, narcissistic tendencies.
I think I might have worked for some of those, but go ahead.
But I think majority of people have good intentions, but these are unconscious habits and behaviors that we're talking about here. And part of the, conscious behaviors of all of us, because even compliers can be arrogant jerks if they fall into that trap, right? They take, and then they snap too. And so we all can be a jerk sometimes. And I think giving ourselves permission to have the confidence in ourselves to speak up, and then also having the confidence to help that person recognize their behaviors. Again, they might say, yeah, I know I'm a jerk. That's just how I am. That's an ego language. That's an ego tactic. They do not truly recognize the impact they're having. They are not conscious in that conversation. You cannot fix them, but you can hold your power and your truth in those moments to either say, you know what, I choose to work with this person, And if I do, then let's try to empower them to recognize their dysfunctional behavior within the organization, especially if you're in a leadership role. Or maybe it's your spouse or your partner at home or your parent, right? We've all have difficult people in our life. Unfortunately, I feel like we are sometimes living in a culture right now. It's like, oh, they're difficult, walk away from them. You don't need them in your life. And I don't think that's teaching anybody anything. I think that is just enhancing the complier ego and letting the complier make themselves right and the rest of the world is wrong. And it's very unhealthy. We have to empower ourselves, especially that complier ego, that you have a voice too. You are empowered to stand up and speak your truth, even if people don't like it. It's okay.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's what we resent the most about the jerks, is that they do speak the truth. And a lot of times no one wants to hear the truth, whether it's sugar. They could probably use a little more sugar. They could probably, soften the elbows when it's delivered. But a lot of times what we do resent in others is the truth. The truth sucks. But sometimes the truth is what we all need to hear.
I have to think about that one. I guess I've looked at it as, yes, an opportunity to grow and to observe and to try different strategies. And sometimes it's okay to let it go.
Absolutely, 100%.
Just let them be. And I guess what it is that in each of our situations, wherever we are, to trust our intuition, to trust what is going to be best for us.
Absolutely. I agree 100% with that. I think we silence our intuition so often, and sometimes we confuse the ego with our intuition. And so when we can weed through, like, what's the ego part of me and what's the best self part of me? An easy tactic to do that is the ownership game. I always say, okay, let's just say you have a difficult person in your life. You've been in this relationship, whether it's professionally or personally. What's your part? What's your ownership of this part of the relationship, right? Because again, whether it's a terrible, marriage, whether it's a terrible job, what's your part? Where have you shown up to allow this to happen? Because at the end of the day, you're here and you're a grown-up and you have power. And so when we can look at it from that place, it's a very empowering place to, one, allow our best self to show up, because we have to own our ugly part too. Did we allow someone to talk to us with rude temper? Did we allow someone to, throw a million things on our plate and we never said no? Did we allow someone to consistently walk all over us because we didn't want to hurt their feelings? Did we allow someone to constantly talk negatively because that's just their way of using language, and we didn't stop them and say, you know what, I don't appreciate that? And so I think that's where we can take ownership and then give ourselves power back to say, okay, what do I need in this relationship for this to be successful? Where we can then show up is we start to bring our best self to the table. If that other person doesn't receive, this is where we get to have a choice. Power, we get our power from choices. When we make ourselves a victim to someone else's choice, to someone else's circumstance, we now become a victim to our own circumstance. And I think that's where the ego likes to keep us playing small. When we can give ourselves permission to say, I can change this circumstance. It might be really hard and it might not include the people that are involved right now, or maybe it'll actually make our relationship better because I'm going to get to stand in my power in this relationship too. And we get to ask them to respect that as well. That is, I think, where ego management truly serves relationships. I work a lot with co-founders and a lot with teams where at least one out of, every academy I work in, there's someone that says my boss is a jerk and they just don't listen to me. And when we do this exercise, it always gives them more power to trust that I can go have a difficult conversation with them because they've been avoiding it for months, years, weeks, whatever. And when someone feels empowered to have those difficult conversations, it doesn't matter if a jerk's in your life. It doesn't matter if it's difficult, because you're not attached to the outcome any longer. You're just allowed to be you. They're allowed to be them. And you get to choose if this is healthy or not. Versus a lot of times what happens is we just make people wrong and then we walk away. And that is a sabotaging tactic.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, definitely. You get more space, although sometimes you do need to walk away just to have some space in order to observe and to get grounded where you
Mhm.
are. So that you can even see it, because it's sometimes the dynamics happen so quickly.
Absolutely.
It's hard to observe in that moment. But I can see that you can build your confidence more by becoming that observer of where you're going, what your tendencies are, and practice speaking. Because I just don't think
Mhm.
that you can do it like, okay, now speak up. Like,
No, if
hello?
all life would be so easy, right?
When
We'd all
it would
lose
just be
the 20
great.
pounds we want to lose, and we all get to like have perfect family lives and perfect
Right.
jobs.
Right.
No, life is hard. And I think that's the thing with the ego. It's messy. But you do have to, I think that observing part, that's really the self-awareness part, stepping back to become aware of what's the truth of the situation, not the perception. Right? We all have a
Mhm.
perception of what's going on in our world. Typically, it's through our own lens. When we can take an elevated view and look at the perception of the whole picture, and now we can step back and say, okay, what's my part in this whole picture? And now what do I need to change in order for me to be happy? Like that's when you get to now take it back to me. If we look at it from here, what do I need in order to be healthy? And then you can also, there's people that are difficult that we cannot get rid of, right? Whether they're our parents, whether they're our children, like we have to learn to deal with difficult people. And so being able to elevate back and say, okay, what's their perspective? What do we need? And it comes now, go from the I to the we. What do we need as a group? How do we manage the egos in the group? Because everybody has an ego. So most likely the egos we clash with are opposite. If you're a complier, you're most likely clashing with the controller protector egos because they're too direct and they're too intense. And everything they say is personal, according to that complier brain. Where the complier, if you're dealing, or a controller, if they're dealing with a complier, most likely they just want that complier to tell them the truth. Give me the truth, because they know they're sugarcoating. They know they're saying they're fine, but they know something's not fine. And so they're just wanting to fix their problem, which makes them more intense, more over controlling, more overbearing to try to fix the problem. Right. And so it becomes this evil cycle of just human behavior. And when we can just start talking truth and start respecting the differences, I promise there is so much more alignment there and so much more empowerment for everybody to just show up differently. It takes time and it's messy. Part of ego management, though, is trusting that you can handle the mess, trusting that other people can handle the mess. The truth sucks, but the truth is where freedom lives. And when we can speak our truth, even if nothing changes, we have a sense of peace inside of us. When we don't speak our truth, that's that internal turmoil that we're feeling at, or that anxiety we're feeling because we didn't speak up. So now something's inside of us, that integrity that lives in our core, and it's just nagging at us saying, why haven't you said anything? Why are you doing this to yourself? Why are they such a jerk? And we start blaming either ourselves or someone else. And instead, just speak up.
Yeah.
Is it hard? Absolutely. It's freaking hard. But
It's
it's worth
good
it.
to practice it, I think. I mean, take little steps towards it and see how you build your confidence and build it more and more. So
Yes. I
definitely.
totally agree. Yeah, it's worth it. Freedom
Yeah,
is worth it. Personal
totally.
freedom.
So I think this is a good place. I mean, we've covered, I think, a lot of the topics we wanted to cover today. And is there anything else that you would like to tell our listeners about that we didn't
Um,
cover?
no, I think I am really satisfied with our conversation. I think this gives some people an idea of what the ego does, how it can sabotage relationships. And if they're interested, I would love for them to reach out and we can I can share more. I think
Yeah.
it's an ongoing conversation for many of us, and own it. It's both your good, your bad, and ugly. And we all need more of your truth and your authentic confidence in the world.
So, how can people find you? Do you want to? I'll have it in the show notes too, but it'd be great for them to know how to find you and follow you.
Yeah, if they are interested in learning more, you can reach me at mindfulchoiceacademy.com or LinkedIn, Christie Garcia. And I would love to connect through email as well, Christie at mindfulchoicecoaching.com. So no matter how you want to get a hold of me, let's connect and see if we can help you live a more balanced, happy, fulfilled life and step into leadership that you're wanting to step into.
Wow, sounds great. Thank you again, Christy, for being with us. It was such a good conversation. Lots of thoughts. I mean, I'm like going, "Rah, rah, rah," I have to think about a lot of it, but sounded so great. Thank you for being with us.
And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.